2021 meeting of the Bolton Conservation Commission, and pursuant to the extension of Governor Baker's March 12, 2020 order suspending certain provisions of the open meeting law, this public meeting of the Bolton Conservation Commission is being conducted via remote participation. No in-person attendance of members of the public will be permitted, but the public can access this meeting while in progress by Zoom Video Communications, Inc. Members of the public attending this meeting virtually will be allowed to make comments if they wish to do so during the portion of the hearing designated for public comment by telephone, cell phone, or personal computer using Zoom. And per our tradition, we will start this evening with a roll call. I am Brian Barabee.
Emily Winter. Jillian Glasanos.
Rebecca Longwell.
Right.
A couple guidelines for participants who are attending this evening. Please utilize the chat or raised hand function to address the board. Please remain on mute until you have been addressed by the board chair, which is Mr. Brian Berube here. And participants are required to display your first and last name for record keeping purposes. So please change that now if you have not done so already. Thank you.
Thank you, Rebecca. All right, and first up this evening, the Bolton Conservation Commission will now continue the public hearing for a request for determination of applicability under Mass General Law, Chapter 131, Section 40, and the Bolton Bylaw, Chapter 233, to discuss a request for determination of applicability regarding the installation of a groundwater monitoring well. Rebecca, the applicants here tonight, or someone representing the applicants?
Yes, I see Phil is on and present.
All right, and Phil, would you be willing to give us a quick rundown of what it is you're looking for here?
I'm happy to, Mr. Chairman. For the record, Phil Cordero from Allen and Major Associates, representing the applicant for potential development on the property, but also the landowners. Very simply, and I'm happy to share my screen if the board would like, as part of our ongoing series of tests for the viability of build out on the property, we need to install a potential drinking water supply well at the rear of the property to test it for potential yield from the aquifer below. So we are requesting through the RDA whether we can perform that drilled well installation pursuant to one that we had done prior with this commission several months ago, keeping in mind the same spirit of ensuring there's erosion control in place, ensuring there's no wash down towards the wetland resource areas, and ensuring that everything is sufficiently far away from the wetland resource areas, and certainly the 25-foot no disturb buffer. Also consistent with the previous ones, we are not asking for any determinations of wetlands as part of this process. That is coming separately through a filed ANRAD that will recertify all of the resource areas on site that will ultimately lay the groundwork for the rest of the development for the property. I'm happy to share my screen if you'd like to see a quick graphic, if that's acceptable to the chair and the members of the commission.
That would be fine. Thank you. Please.
Thank you.
Just let me know if you're not able to access that feature.
Looks like it's coming up.
Great.
So I just want to give you frame of reference. Obviously, the RDA is not pursuant to this development plan, but this is the LIP application plan that was filed to the Board of Selectmen for the development. And what we are looking at, and can you see the cursor move, Mr. Chairman? Okay, great.
I can see it, yes.
So what we're looking at is we sought permission from this commission under a previous RDA to drill the well located with this radius to determine that potential yield earlier in the year. There is an existing well that serves the Bolton Office Park. We're asking for permission to drill this well about 50 feet westerly of that within that same region. So just jumping over to the site plan, we have the wetland resource area is delineated. It's the shaded zone. The magenta line is the 25-foot local no disturb, with the blue line being the 100-foot jurisdictional area through the commission. As I zoom in, I'll get really close. This, where my cursor is moving, is the existing well, and we're looking to drill approximately 55 feet westerly of that, which is a net of about 75 feet from the wetland resource areas.
Okay,
And for the benefit of the commission's agent, we did stake that out in the field, and we did put the erosion barriers up. So hopefully that comes across on the screen. I'll just zoom in further on that, just so you can get an idea of what we'd be looking to do. So this center stake is where the well would be drilled. We would request permission to clear this underbrush for the purposes of getting the machinery in there, but no clearing that would exist outside of this zone. And hopefully the commission through the screen can see that, can see the straw wattle bale that encompasses the potential work zone to make sure there are no downstream spoil migrations.
Okay. All right. Thank you. Let me open up to commission members first. Anybody have any initial questions or thoughts?
Just wanted to clarify the removal of the underbrush. Would that just be what we're seeing in this photo? No trees? Do you need to remove any to do that?
No, ma'am. Just what you see in this photograph. And you can see it really is some light underbrush. There are a couple of stocky trees here. If you, I don't know, again, if they translate on the Zoom, one of two of those, they're real short trees, may have to come out for access of the machinery, but our goal would be to thread the needle and keep those in place. You can see where the drilled well zone is by the stake, and the underbrush right there is what really needs to come out, just enough to back the RTV rig up to that location. And that location, for the benefit of the commission, is selected based on the Zone 1 protective radius around it, which is why it's so very specifically chosen in this area, because it's the dimensional location that meets the potential water withdrawal requirements for the property.
Any other initial questions?
The monitoring well, if the monitoring well is going here, this is where the proposed location for a second well would be, correct?
So to be clear, it is not a monitoring well. It would be the drilled well location for a drinking water supply well. So the initial test is to drill down and install the casing to test for water yield. But if that yield comes back sufficient per Mass DEP requirements, it does become the home of the well.
I just wanted to ask too, you know, when this first came up tonight, I was like, I thought we had just done this, and I know we had done that monitoring well. If you go back to the first slide for the other side. Generally speaking, we don't like to do these things piecemeal, one at a time, and let's go here and let's go there. So I guess one of the questions I had is, are there more coming? Would this ask tonight be better served as part of a more comprehensive plan? We, like I said, with other projects, we've always tried to avoid it. I guess that's my first question. Are there more coming down the pike, and is it possible to include this with just a larger full look at the project or the plan?
Okay, so it's an excellent question, Mr. Chairman, and let me address that because the commission's agent and I had that very conversation. We have no inherent desire to bother you every couple of months with one of these small filings. We'd much rather do them in an aggregate sense. The reason we've had to do it in this piecemeal fashion that I apologize for is it is an investigative and an iterative study to determine what the yield was from this first well, determine if that was enough. And that wasn't enough. We had to look to the existing well, and that still is not enough for the project. And now we need to look at this third well. The reason we can't combine it into a master proposal for you for the all-encompassing project is without the water, we don't have the project. So we really need to perform these evaluations now, and that will lead us down the road to the full notice of intent, which will be the rest of the project. We have, to be clear, no additional plans for another stutter step RDA with you. This will get us where we need to be. We have completed our soil evaluation for the on-site septic leach fields. This will mark the completion of the on-site testing for the drinking water supply wells. And those two processes have the longest lead time because of Mass DEP's involvement. So the next time you see us, we will be in front of you as part of the ANRAD process to confirm all of the resource areas. And then that will be a precursor towards a notice of intent relative to the plan that you see on the screen now.
Okay. Well, I should say, ask Rebecca, do you have any thoughts or comments on this?
I do. One in particular, and I do understand due diligence, and as you're trying to figure out different aspects about the site related to your future proposed project and site suitability. And that's all worked into the Wetlands Protection Act and our local bylaw to allow for those very temporary testing or temporary investigations into the property. I do have to apologize in a sense, because my understanding of the previous well was that it was a test well, but some temporary infrastructure would be installed, potentially it would be removed. But I appreciate, Phil, that this one you're much more clear about what exactly is going in the infrastructure associated with that investigation versus test. And I think that's something that the commission should be aware of, just the technicality of, but an important one of, is this a test that fits under those exemptions potentially, or is this something that may require a notice of intent? And I think maybe that falls into, can the infrastructure, if for some reason it's not, and I'm not saying anything about the project, but just the temporary or more permanent infrastructure of this investigation associated with the investigation, is there the ability to remove that if there was an issue later on? And I think that's something that the commission should know so that they can make a full determination on whether it's something that falls underneath a potential exemption, something that can be conditioned under an RDA, or is this something jurisdictional beyond a test, beyond site suitability that's covered under those exemptions, and then requiring what those next steps are. I don't have strong feelings one way or another, but I would just like to bring that up. My other comment is related to the amount of wells on this site. And I understand you need to meet a specific yield.
Mm-hmm.
My question is, though, I believe, and on this plan, it doesn't show it, or it doesn't show it clearly. I believe there's other wells on site aside from the 3 you've highlighted towards the southern end of the property. And I was curious why those are no longer shown, and if they're going to be basically no longer used, or if those are still going to be used, why do you then need to test for these other locations?
So, okay, was there anything else I can answer? Hopefully both of those questions.
The other question was just if the commission wants different erosion control. I personally think that's sufficient for the well. It's similar to what we saw on the opposite side. And then the commission has the ability to add a condition about stabilization after and how that material gets moved around, which again, we talked about last time. So I would expect it to be fairly similar.
Okay. To answer your questions, Rebecca, so question number 1 about the permanence of this and what is our backup plan? So obviously we are requesting the RDA under the provisions of the Wetlands Protection Act, which allows for on-site suitability testing, which we believe this to fall under, but your local regulations obviously don't differentiate between that level under the Wetlands Protection Act. You basically treat all actions equal. We're asking for an exemption from that to allow the installation of these wells without the notice of intent. If for whatever reason, any of these wells that we have drilled, both under the previous RDA or this one, if there were some prominent failure or some rethinking or something we would need to do, we would obviously, I think those familiar with drinking water supply wells at your home really just are a casing above grade, a 6-inch pipe, about 2 feet above grade. We would basically remove that casing, remove the top section, backfill the well and decommission it in its entirety, and you would vegetate over it. You'd have no idea, quite frankly, that it was ever there. So the intrusion is minimal. The repair of the zone, if necessary, is easily achievable if this commission ultimately decides there's a problem down the line when we come through for the potential notice of intent for all the infrastructure itself. The second question is regarding the existing wells that are on site. We are only able to utilize one of those wells, which is directly adjacent to this one that I'm looking for permission to do it on here. The other well would be decommissioned entirely as it's not suitable for our project. There is a third well, Rebecca, at the front of the site. It's an irrigation well. We don't show that because there are no protective zones. So just to be clear, there are 3 existing wells on the property, one that will be decommissioned, one that will be reused, and the irrigation one, which is ancillary to all of the process. When we're complete, assuming all of the yield rates are there and DEP ultimately approves them as drinking water supplies, we will have 3 wells on site to be used.
So just, if I may ask a question about the irrigation well, and again, the reason why I'm asking these questions and they relate back to the RDA is, again, the purpose of that, which I understand you have it, but I just want to understand it a little better. So that other irrigation well is not allowed for drinking water or to function that way.
That's correct.
Okay.
Right. The irrigation well, let me back up and be as brief as I can. All wells are the same. They're simply straws into the ground.
Yeah.
But when you need certain volumes, those wells need to meet certain standards. The irrigation well does not meet that standard. And the particular standards are the protective zones around it. The zone 1 radiuses, which are these darkened circles, those need to be located entirely on site, entirely controlled by the owner of the land or under permanent agreement, permanent easement. The irrigation well, which is located right adjacent to Main Street, couldn't provide such protective radius, so therefore it would never meet the DEP drinking water standards.
Okay. Thank you. I appreciate you expressing that.
Thank you.
Rebecca, anybody here from the public to comment on this evening?
I see no one.
Okay. Rebecca, I don't know if you were planning to go out in the field to go see this one. I'm somewhat familiar with the site. I haven't been out to that side of it in a while. I might request a site visit, partially just because I'd like to go out and take another look. And like I said, I haven't been out there in a while. But also, I'd probably ask if we could continue tonight anyways, just so we can kind of write some of that standard language in, some of the language we used last time, and basically just have it all ready to go at the next meeting. So would that make it, would you be willing to continue for one meeting? Just basically, like I said, so we can get it all written out.
Mr. Chairman, we would love for you, obviously, to come out to the site and visit and see whatever it is you would like. But I'm going to be candidly aggressive in that the season is quickly sunsetting on us, and we're losing the ability to retain drillers that can actually drill the well. So we are quite motivated to try to get them out there ASAP. And quite candidly, even a 2-week delay may cause a ripple effect where we actually lose them and we can't get them back. And it ultimately will stall the entirety of the application that's currently going in front of the zoning board Monday evening. I do not mean to put all of that pressure and burden on the decision of the commission. But I also want to be open and forthcoming as to how the process proceeds afterwards. We would be happy to coordinate with the commission's agent, coordinate with erosion measures and the restoration language that we did carry forth in the previous RDAs in the interest and ability of allowing this to proceed. We'd ask for the agent to come out and inspect us before we do anything in the interest of allowing this to proceed. And then we could certainly absolutely coordinate a site visit with the commission at any time of your choosing. But again, obviously with the interest of maybe allowing this to proceed in order to hold the schedule. Again, the burden is not on the commission, but I just want to be open about the whole process.
Right, which I appreciate. Thoughts from, well, first of all, Rebecca, well, thoughts from other commission members. I was going to say, do we think it's possible, if we were to pass it tonight, to lay out those conditions verbally?
I think the fact that we've
Go
been through this previously with the test wells, and this is in the general area of a previously approved test well. It's 50 feet outside, further outside of the buffer. Right, we had an original test well right at the 25-foot buffer off of the wetland.
Actually, that's the functioning well in this one.
Oh, that wasn't one of the test wells. Got it.
Right,
Okay.
that's the actual well from the site. Yeah, but
That's the
yes,
source
that
well.
general.
Got it. Yeah, I mean, I think part of what we have in our favor is that we have been through this process for the test wells, I'll say then. And we talked about specific conditions then that we could incorporate into this. I mean, aside from what has been brought up previously, I don't have any major concerns about this. Rebecca, I think covered my question. I was kind of curious about the numerous wells as well. And I think that was clarified and covered. So I guess I would just say that I think I would be comfortable approving with conditions tonight.
Emily, just another note as well, pun not intended. These sites, as Phil mentioned, still have to be approved when they file a notice of intent for their future proposed project. So even if the commission does allow for this, just like we allowed for the other, to see that it creates the yield that's necessary for their proposed project, this will still be part of an approval process in the future. Is that correct, Phil?
That is correct.
Okay.
These are simply the well points. If they prove viable, we have to install the infrastructure to draw that water out of the well and bring it to a treatment house. That will all be encompassed in the notice of intent, ma'am.
Thank you.
Rebecca, do you think we would be, how difficult would it be for us to verbally add those certain conditions? Or similar conditions?
I
that we had?
can, what I can do is I can try to pull up that permit and then just verbally read those conditions into this record, and then you can say, as stated by the conservation agent, I think is the easiest way to do it. Not that I love that idea, but if the commission's willing to work with the applicant, I think that's probably the best way to do it. I'm just trying to find them right now. Is that what you would, how you would like to approach this, Brian?
I was gonna say that seems to be the most logical way to actually pull it off. And I can understand the seasonal time constraints. It sounds like Emily, you seem fine with that. Jillian, fine with that?
Yeah.
To the benefit of the commission, maybe I can save Rebecca a few clicks. If the screen is still shared, this is the original decision for the other well that was drilled and the special conditions that were imposed upon that RDA decision. And you can see in full the bolden 4 conditions that were there.
Yep. We don't need the last one.
I guess maybe we could get clarification too, Phil, about the extent of the clearing of the underbrush. I don't know if it's like a 10-foot radius around the well, a 5-foot radius. That might be an important condition, Brian, to have in there.
Yeah.
Just to kind of get that clearing and, you know, limited to, it looked like there were some like 4-inch diameter trees. I don't know if we want to just say like there's a certain diameter, you know, from the well, but something to that, just adding to these existing conditions from the previous application.
Yeah, it looks like we could remove number 4 from this. And then, like you said, just something about the brush that's removed and trees being removed.
We could, Mr. Chairman, we could certainly be flexible to the commission's wishes because obviously you're helping us along in the process. To answer the commissioner's question more specifically, I don't know exactly, quite candidly, how much vegetation needs to be removed. You know, for purposes of quick math, the truck is a typical drill rig, which is 10, 12 feet wide, and they'll have some outriggers that come out. You know, so there's some variability, 15-ish feet maybe for them to stage a vehicle might be generous. But I don't have that exact number and I wouldn't want to mislead you with wrong information.
Yep. And just looking at the picture, it looks like you'd be able to get the drill rig in there without removing any serious trees. And I couldn't see why you'd want to remove any serious trees to get it in. If we go with a certain, nothing larger than a certain diameter tree being removed, I would imagine you'd be able to work it in.
I would think so. Just flipping through the photographs again, you know, with the stake shown with the ribbon flagging, there is some meadow grass that we could get a lot of access. It's just all this undergrowth that has to go. So we would surgically go in. Again, we have no interest to clear cut.
Right.
We just want to get the rig in there.
Okay.
So nothing larger than 6-inch diameter shall be removed within the limit of work. Might be a good
6-inch.
Yep.
Okay. Would you be willing to pull up your screen with those conditions?
Oh, yes, of course.
Again, Phil, I'm sorry.
No problem at all. Happy to do it.
Perfect. Okay. I'm going to attempt this. So first of all, I'd like to make a motion that we close the public hearing for a request for determination for 580 for request for determination of applicability for 580 Main Street. Do I hear a second for closing?
Second.
All right. All those in favor, we'll start with Emily,
Aye.
Jillian,
Aye.
and Rebecca. I am an aye as well. All right. I'd like to make a motion that we have a -3 determination for the project for 580 Main Street with the following conditions. That erosion barriers shall be in place and approved before work begins. The slurry from the drilling of the test well shall be kept within erosion controls and outside the resource areas to the greatest extent practicable. The slurry shall be graded out and reseeded on site to allow the area to naturalize. That an area no larger than 15 feet from the proposed well can be used, that the clearing of vegetation be limited to an area no larger than 15 feet from the proposed well, and no trees or growth of greater than 6 inches in diameter shall be removed. That cover everything that we discussed? All right, in that case, do I hear a second for that motion?
Second.
All right, all those in favor, starting with Emily,
Aye.
Jillian,
Aye.
and Rebecca, I am an aye as well.
Thank you, Commission. Thank you for your understanding and hearing us here. And this will be it. We'll be back with something of more substance next time.
All right, good luck.
Thank you.
Thank
Please
you.
don't forget to stop share.
Oh, you got it.
Oh,
Thank you
yeah.
very much.
Thank you.
How are we on time? Oh, perfect. Okay. At this point, the Bolton Conservation Commission will now continue the public hearing for a request for a certificate of compliance for 147 Long Hill Road, a common driveway, followed by, I'm sorry, as I'm reading it off the screen, Rebecca, I was going to say, is there an update on this? But as we can see, we are still awaiting the survey results. And I believe the applicant did request a continuation for that reason. All right, and now if I don't get all
Yes.
tongue-tied again, I see no reason why we wouldn't continue it. The first available time at our next meeting is,
Oh, this is a good question.
we're the 16th, if I remember correctly.
Yes, let me pull it up quickly. That one should be 7:15.
7:15?
Yeah.
Okay. In that case, I'd like to make a motion that we continue the public hearing for a request for a certificate of compliance for 147 Long Hill Road till our next public hearing, Tuesday, November 16th at 7:15 PM. Do we hear a second for that?
Second.
All right, all those in favor, Emily,
Aye.
Jillian,
Aye.
and Rebecca, I am an I as well.
Great, thank you.
Brian, this is Bill.
Oh, Bill Payne.
I showed up a little late.
It's perfectly fine. We missed you. So for the public record, William Payne, Conservation Commission member, has joined us. And Bill, how did you vote, or do you wish to vote, and how do you vote on continuing 147 Long Hill until our next meeting?
I am an I also.
That is excellent.
Thank you.
Okay, we have a few minutes. Did people have a chance to read through the minutes for, what was it, October 19th? And if so, any questions, typos, changes, and or anybody need more time to read through it? Not hearing that. I'd like to make a motion that we approve the minutes for our October 19th, 2021 meeting as drafted and submitted at this evening's meeting. Do we have a second for that?
I second.
All right, all those in favor, starting with Emily,
Aye.
Jillian,
Aye.
Bill,
Aye.
and Rebecca, I am an I as well.
Thank you.
Rebecca, are there any updates that you think you can squeeze in 10 minutes?
Sure. So we have the new story walk that will be installed tomorrow afternoon at Bower Springs Conservation Area around the lower pond. The author of that book being featured in the story walk, the author, now I'm getting tongue-tied, is Sarah Adams Pine, and she will be leading a reading of the story walk on November 7th, which is this Sunday at 10:30 a.m. We are asking those interested to RSVP just by emailing me with the number of attendees from your family or friends, just so we can keep an eye on how many people are there. Because it's a very heavily trafficked property on top of it. Another event that is going on is at the Danforth Conservation Area, so off of Hudson Road or Route 85. I will be hosting a guided walk on November 23rd, starting at 3 p.m. We are sort of playing with daylight here. So it will depend on how fast our group is, if we'll make the full loop or not. But we will be keeping an eye on that. So it may end up being a relatively short walk, but fall is a perfect time to hike the Danforth area. Then we have our Nashua River Communities Resilient Lands Management Project going on. You may be seeing some emails about being a member of our core team or forest task group in the coming weeks. That is what it is about. And we are working on land management to become more resilient, increase carbon storage. And we also have a volunteer land steward position still open. You can contact my office if you are interested in that opportunity. I think. Oh, the other, ignore that. The other was, Brian, do we have time, you think, to talk about the authorization to submit and file the notice of intent?
I was looking at that. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, we definitely do. I believe our next hearing is getting continued as well, right?
Yes.
So if we start it late, I don't think anybody's here to comment. Okay. So I was gonna say, do you want to give the rundown of this?
Sure.
Okay.
So on the agenda, you'll see that there is a request for a vote for the commission to consider authorizing their agent, which is myself, to fill out the notice of intent and then submit the notice of intent for 1 to 2 gravel parking spaces and a crossing into the Taggart Conservation Area. So this area is off of Forbush Mill Road, the Taggart property that was recently acquired by the town of Bolton. There is an adjacent conservation property that's a little bit more gradual to get into. There is an existing extremely temporary piece of wood that some of our DPW members were able to find for us for the ribbon cutting ceremony. It stayed there for longer. That does need to be removed, which I will do, but we do need to put a crossing there so that individuals can get into the property without walking into the wetland resource area. And adjacent to that area in the upland, still within riverfront area though, we would like to put 1 or 2 gravel parking areas. This was something that was described in the land grant submittal and as part of the acquisition project, as far as creating a small trailhead and 1 to 2 vehicles parking there. We are ultimately, the larger picture, ultimately we're going to connect to the Forbush Mill Fields parking area through a trail. But at this time, we still need to create that parking space, at least 1, if not 2, along the frontage of Taggart itself. And again, that was required through the land grant. So that's all you are authorizing, is just the notice of intent, and I will send that to you as well prior to submittal. I will be drafting that document, filling it out, and submitting it to DEP and you for your approval. And then we'll hear from DEP what conditions may be encouraged. I am formatting it similar to Annie Moore because that is a project that was done in the past. The activities were done by the Girl Scouts, but the project was permitted by my predecessor and the commission to put it through that permitting process, see what DEP wanted conditioned on it. And then again, the Girl Scouts carried out the work. So I'm trying to frame it in a similar format to something that's already been done.
That makes sense.
Mhm.
Commission members understand what we're talking about or have questions, thoughts? Okay. All right. In that case, I'm gonna ask for a roll call vote. All right, and we're voting to authorize our conservation agent to prepare and submit a notice of intent on our behalf, on the commission's behalf, for a crossing and 1 to 2 gravel parking areas to access the Taggart Forestland parcel from Furbish Mill Road. All those in favor, starting with Emily,
Aye.
Jillian,
Aye.
Bill,
Aye.
and Rebecca, I am an aye as well.
Thank you.
Thank you. We still have a few minutes.
Did you want to talk briefly about the policy?
Yeah, I think that's probably best. Right, we can do that.
Okay, so the events on conservation land policy, I'm gonna pull something up in a minute. This came into fruition, I guess, because we have had multiple requests to film on conservation land over the past year. Some of which, upon further investigation, actually don't end up being on conservation land. It's just adjacent to, it's a private property with a conservation restriction over it. But we're realizing that we really do need to have something in place, we being the town. And the select board has something in place for using parking and spaces that the town owns. I think the commission should have something similar. This document was framed essentially the same as the town of Stowe, which is a neighboring town, similar characteristics in population, along with ecological makeup as well. So from there, it does talk about what is required, and it's a more formal way of someone asking this question and the questions that I would then respond with to see exactly what type of event they're having, what does it entail, how many people are involved. Then there is a potential fee associated with it. The commission has the ability to, at this time, draft that into the document. I would have to speak to the town administrator and the select board or town accountant to see exactly how those funds would come in and out of the town. But I do not think it's a bad idea to require that, because it's another source of income. I believe because it's on conservation land, it has to be used for conservation purposes, but I can double check that as well. So we have the policy that I just scanned through, and then the permit application that goes along with it. It's pretty straightforward as far as what information is requested: your name, contact information, a brief description, date and hours of use, public, private event, and then some more information so that we can really understand where and what is going on site. Again, this would be all events on conservation land. So if there were, we've also had requests for people to host meetings. I think the last one we had was a meditation circle, or that might not be the correct way to say it, but anyway, someone coming, hosting an event on the property that's open to the public. This gives them a little bit more flexibility as well, to have it be a potentially more private event. But of course, individuals walking through the property, we don't close the property because someone's having an event. But they can restrict people attending their event, even though that's a little confusing in understanding, I'm sure.
Yeah.
Are there any questions or concerns? Or does this sound like something the commission would be interested in starting to practice once we iron out the draft document?
I speak for me. Yeah, I do think it is something we should adopt. It makes a lot of sense to me. Like you said, we may need to iron it out a little bit more. I like that you were able to borrow a lot of language from Stowe. Again, a lot of it seems to fit what we would be looking at. I'd say if it turns out that, according to our bylaws, if it doesn't need to go directly to conservation, that we could also just write that in to these guidelines right here, saying that, a fee to conservation, that, we would actually should try to make sure we put that in if it's not already covered. But yeah, no, I agree in principle with what we're trying to do here. I did read through it a little bit, but I need to really take a good look at it. Just curious if others have thoughts.
I would also like to go through it again, Rebecca.
Yeah.
And then regarding, I think Brian brought up a good point. I think the fee too, like, I think, if you're having like a small gathering or a private, a smaller private event versus if there's like filming happening there, I almost, and I don't know what flexibility there is, but I almost feel like first, yes, the fee should definitely go back to conservation for maintaining the properties. I think that is important. But I also, and I don't want to overthink it, but I'm just like, if you had a larger group and there was filming going on for several days, or I don't know what kind of filming this is that's being proposed, but I'm just thinking about impacts to the conservation land and if that fee should be adjusted based on size of group, what is happening on the property for the event. And it's only looking at it from is there any maintenance or restoration that needs to happen as a result? Is there a lot of foot traffic? Is there, I don't know. And again, I could be overthinking it, but that's just kind of where my mind went. And then I did see that they would hold an insurance policy. I don't know if that's liability insurance or if that would cover any damage to the property as a result of the event. So those are kind of things that I'm thinking of. But I think this document is really important and I think it'll be good. And I think it'll be very clear for, when we consider, allowing events on the property. But my biggest concern would be, okay, what are the impacts to the conservation property and how do we cover that if anything happens? And not from a life standpoint. So just more of, the condition of the property and impacts too.
I'll talk to Parks and Recreation and then the town administrator and see if they have sort of like a flexible fee or different categories that basically meet exactly what you're talking about regarding their size or impact, and see what we have already and maybe duplicate that or try and use similar language. But I can definitely look into that. I think that's a great point.
Yeah, I'm just thinking like, okay, you have a yoga class versus you have a film crew there for 4 days or whatever, there's definitely going to be different impacts to the property. So that's great. Yeah, there must be, I'm guessing there's something, right? I mean, hopefully there's something in place that we could use for comparison, but.
Yeah, there definitely is, whether it's in Bolton or another town. I'm sure someone has some sort of fee schedule that they use for various events. So I'll definitely look that up and I will send that out to the commission. And again, this is definitely a draft document right now. So I do appreciate feedback like that to make sure that I'm incorporating what we want this document to be and what we want it to be used for. And then once we get as close as we can to a final, then we'll have it approved and voted on at a commission meeting. I think it may need to go to the select board as well, but I'll have to double check on that because of the fees. But again, I'll double check on those items and then relay that information back to you.
Also, sorry, Rebecca, in relation to the fee schedule, the liability insurance, I don't know if that would change based on group size, or I think there was one value in there. I don't know, but I'm again looking at like, somebody hosting a yoga class on the property versus a large group of X number of people. I don't know if that's just in town, if this would be,
So typically, this is, I believe, a typical business certificate of liability insurance. At least it's fairly common from what I've seen, but I can't say that I've seen many from yoga instructors or different things like that. But my experience is that this is fairly reasonable and
Okay.
fairly typical of that request. But I can certainly ask that as well. Again, I'm sure the town Parks and Rec must have something because they have various user groups on their properties. I'll follow up on that as well.
Any other initial thoughts on these guidelines for Rebecca? And of course, everybody, please email Rebecca this week if you have a chance. And then I guess, Rebecca, I'm hoping if you take into account some of the things we've heard tonight, I know you're still talking with Dawn, figuring a few things out. We may have an actual draft that we could possibly vote on at next meeting.
Yeah, I can definitely, once I speak with the appropriate parties and do a little bit more research on it, I can definitely send out an additional draft before the next meeting, and then the commission can discuss it at the next meeting to see if it is in the final form.
Excellent. All right. Thank you. Oh, look at that. Yep, that's where I was heading. All right, so the Bolton Conservation Commission will now continue the public hearing for a notice of intent filed for 580 Main Street, map 4.C, parcel 24, and operations and maintenance of stormwater basin within the resource areas. Rebecca, is there an update on this particular hearing?
Yes, we did receive, I believe the representatives are present as well, Jeff O'Neill and Scott
okay.
Smyers. But we did receive the DEP file number with comments. The DEP file number is 1120701. We just received this today at about 11 o'clock this morning. And the comments were that the applicant should identify the locations of the beaver dam to be removed, in addition to the proposed machine access path, which will be required to reach the dam. If clearing of vegetation within BVW will be required for access to the beaver dam, the applicant should provide the total area of disturbance and restoration or seeding plan to ensure the access path naturalizes following the proposed work. So the applicant had also sent me on Monday, which unfortunately it did not meet the Thursday by noon deadline, a revised document related to their a revised operation maintenance plan that incorporated all the revisions and notes and concerns that were brought up at the site visit, but they did not incorporate what was in these comments because we just got them this morning. So I had also revised a operation maintenance draft last week with the exact same information that the applicant had put in because we're all at the site visit, hearing the same information. Some of the revisions included removal of a few multi-floor rows, then some clarification on some wording within the O&M. There was also some clarification on the process for the beaver removal permits. There were mentions about flow devices, and I'll let the applicant speak to any other revisions that I'm just missing off the top of my head, but I did incorporate into the draft as well. Once we got these comments, that I had, to the best of my ability, incorporated into that revision the location of the beaver dam to be removed, and then the proposed machine access path, which will be required to reach the dam. What I did not have information on or had a good ability to estimate based on the information and the conversations that had occurred is the total area of disturbance for that work, and then the restoration and seeding plan. So the disturbance and restoration associated with that work within the bordering vegetated wetland. I know there's not a large supporting vegetated wetland along that brook, but I do know there is some. So I will let the applicant speak to that if you would prefer that, Mr. Chair.
I think that would be excellent if the applicant is willing.
Sure. Hi, I'm Scott Smyers from Oxbow Associates. And as Rebecca succinctly summarized, that is good. I suggest if you needed a plan, it sounds like maybe Rebecca already added some of the information to a draft plan or some reference, but perhaps we could just use a GPS and locate where the beaver dam is and provide a figure that's accurate in the future, the next few days. But we're looking to move this thing along. So if that was something that we could approve perhaps another way, and then with the understanding we could submit that later, I think it would be accurate and it would fit the bill. So you could check that box off for the DEP. But the actual square footage of the work area, I mean, I haven't measured it exactly, but I gotta think it's no more than like 750 square feet right along the buffer zone there. I'm not sure how much of that is exactly BVW and how much is actually buffer zone, not BVW. But of course we have floodplain in some of those locations too. But as you're aware, the vegetation along the shoreline was dominated by the multiflora rows that we saw there. So we were going to get rid of that and restore that area with native species after that's removed. So that's really the biggest disturbance. And as I think we can agree that that disturbance will end up being a benefit once we get rid of the multiflora rows and get native species in there. But of course, we don't want to leave any exposed soils or create any erosion problems. So we'll take all the standard precautions we can in those areas, and possibly even if we have a backhoe in that area, we could maybe even get just some plywood to put down in a small area like that to minimize the disturbance if they can drive on that, if the operator is willing to, if that makes sense to the operator. I don't want to speak for the operator, but there are some fairly simple methods we can apply to minimize that. And I'd say the impact area is probably like on the order of like 750 square feet, somewhere in there, but we can get you better measurements if you need that. And I could go through the document in more details, but I don't think it's really necessary the way Rebecca described it. I thought that was fine, but I'm here to answer any of your questions.
Sure, and I appreciate that one. Rebecca, could you remind me, there were two questions, and again, I appreciate, I would say, Rebecca, you did work most of what DEP was looking for into the draft I saw today, as well as everything we had talked about on site. So I think we got most of it in there, but it looked like there were two questions we were missing, that just that total area of disturbance. And was there one about seating?
Yep. So the question from DEP that I wasn't sure, but it sounds like Scott's has an estimation of about 750 square feet of alteration within, and I'm going to say jurisdictional area.
Yeah.
Because to his point, we're not positive without an actual survey in the field of where that is. And then, so the disturbance and then the total restoration or seeding plan to ensure that the access path naturalizes following the proposed work. So to Scott's point, I have seen all tech mats used, or it's like a large plastic mat, depending on the equipment, or wood, like he was stating, some boarding, and essentially it may impact the grass, but then if they allow for maybe the commission conditions, a buffer of 50 feet that's not maintained as lawn or something to that nature regarding the restoration and seeding with I know typically the commission uses a native seed mix, whether that be a wildlife or wetland mix, as the site conditions will determine. But I think the total restoration area or area to be restored, I think that would be helpful as well to receive, but the commission also has the ability to request that as an as-built. as well, since it is something that's occurring after the disturbance occurs.
And again, I'll ask other commission members for their thoughts, but I was thinking a similar thing with the area of disturbance. I think we have an idea where it's going to go, even though we don't have the exact number. And then, like you said, asking for that to be included in an as-built so that we have it for the record, I think would be fine. And I was just trying to think if we had good language to put in about the seating and disturbance. And if we could come up with that good language for that, I think I would be fine approving it tonight as it's been drafted with that additional piece in. But I'm curious to hear what other commission members have thoughts or comments.
I just also want to note that the multiflora rose needs to be cut and hand pulled. We talked about this on site. No herbicides, right? We talked, the question came up on their site walk. So I'd just like that to be in the conditions as well. And then there was also, we talked about on the site walk there in that exact same area was being used to dump grass clippings. So future, the grass, there needs to be like a specific area where grass clippings are being composted that's not in the resource area. And I think that, I think the seed mix is good. And then I do think that once those multiflora rows are out and the native, whatever, there is native growth along there. So I think we, some of what's in the earth there anyway is going to come up, which would be an added benefit to the seed mix. And then as Rebecca said, the not maintaining, the lawn was maintained right up to the resource area. So leaving a buffer zone of not maintained lawn where it can naturalize and just be native growth. I wanted to just piggyback onto her comment earlier. So I think that's everything.
Sorry, I'm jotting that down. Other questions, comments, thoughts? Okay. Rebecca, I'm going to ask you to help me with wording if possible.
Sure.
So when it comes to that reseeding, all right, the disturbed area shall be.
May I make a
reseeded and
suggestion?
left. Go ahead.
Yes, we have several different varieties of seed mixes in our office. And a lot of times in an area like that where it's very flat, and if we're looking to reclaim a portion of the lawn edge, as long as that's okay with Jeff here, then we can probably pick two different seed mixes, one that's more for wet sites right along the shoreline where the dam is going to be removed, and will certainly be some soil disturbance in there. And then one that's a little bit more of a drier seed mix for further away from the edge of the water. So I'd suggest we use two different types of seed mixes, native mixes. We can give you the specs on those specifically. Usually I just take a picture of the species, the label that it comes with, and I can provide that to Rebecca and say approximately how many ounces we used of each one. And that would be part of the record for that part of the project, the beaver dam removal. So it could be conditioned, I guess is what I'm thinking. You could condition that we give you a short summary of it as long as we use the native mixes, two different mixes probably. And we could provide photographs and all that, because when you rip up the bushes, they're going to have exposed soil right at the base at least. So we want to get something there.
Sure.
But other places it might not be as needed if it's already thickly grown in.
Sure. And I appreciate that. And again, with the total area disturbed, I'm happy with that in an as-built, but I think when it comes to some of these questions about reseeding, it should actually probably be in the order of conditions.
Okay, sure.
If that makes sense.
Yeah.
If I can get because I think we can hopefully word it in a way that allows you to use, a native seed mix multiple native seed mixes, best by area where, you can use a wet seed mix or more of an upland.
Yeah.
I'm just questioning, how do I word that? And Rebecca, if you have
Right.
any suggestions on a good way to word that.
I would say the commission could consider an alteration within the jurisdictional area related to beaver dam removal of up to 750 square feet for, 750 square feet that shall be restored with native seed mixes appropriate for site conditions upon completion of dam removal.
Yep.
And we already have those conditions in the document related to, in order to be in compliance, it has to meet the 75% growth over a 2-season growing period. Or one, depending on what the commission feels. And then to ensure the access path naturalizes following the proposed work. So after the note about the native seed mix, I think I would say to ensure the access path naturalizes following the proposed work. And then that's verbatim what the DEP was looking for.
Having it down.
I'm sorry, Jeff, what did you say?
I haven't said anything, but I bring up one question is how would we close this out if we have to wait 2 seasons on growing and get the encumbrance released off of title prior, which is extremely important.
You can do a partial and then noting that you're just waiting for the growing period, or once you've done the seeding, you can come before the commission and maybe the commission will consider something at that time.
I think it's rather important we follow the latter, only because the next filing from the applicant that's on and was previously on will be coming in pretty close, right behind us.
Okay.
So we need to get that released at some point so they can go ahead and file, the way I understand it.
So the commission also has the ability to issue ongoing conditions in perpetuity. So that the commission has the ability, and that's why I say the commission may consider something if you file the request for COC. So that is really the only information I can provide you, or rather the commission can provide you on how to proceed. But it's not uncommon for those two things to happen, for either a partial to be granted or a certificate of compliance with ongoing conditions in perpetuity. Or what also has occurred is, and again, I'm not sure because as I understand it to some extent, the property is going to be split up. But at times with a new property owner, if we are notified of a new property owner and the order of conditions is relayed to that new property owner, we have to be provided with an affidavit, related deed showing that, in a letter from the new property owner stating that they understand there's an order of conditions, they've reviewed it, etc. That typically happens when someone buys a home or buys a property with an open order. So that is doable, but I do understand that it may be that route may be a little complicated with your process. I'm not sure how it works when it's splitting the parcel.
The O&M that's being presented is going to be ongoing and continual. So that's going to last and will be part of the process. It's just, we're trying to do the right thing, go in and remove a beaver dam, but we don't want to get stuck in, we can't get approval and sign off for 2 years until we get through 2 growing seasons. That seems a little, if that's the case, I should just leave the beaver dam there, And I don't think that's doing anybody a benefit of what we want to try to accomplish.
So what it sounds like is once the commission makes a decision this evening, or
Mhm.
maybe it sounds like they are going to make a decision this evening and not wait another public meeting.
Right.
If they make a decision this evening, you have the ability to send in a request for a certificate of compliance saying we want ongoing conditions.
Right.
And then the commission can consider that at the next meeting. I can't say what the commission will say. They can't say that at this meeting because that's not being discussed currently.
Right.
But that's certainly, again, the options are when someone requests a certificate of compliance is a denial, a partial, ongoing conditions, or a complete certificate of compliance. So that's what the commission is able to consider once they receive such a request.
In respect to this particular activity, though, I mean, the spirit of the notice of intent and the operation and maintenance plan, part of the important part is one important part of it is the beaver dam monitoring and trying to minimize the amount of time that we might have to go into the future and remove beaver dams and create some disruption similar to what we're talking about. But it's not out of the ordinary to think that it may happen again in the future. There may be another beaver dam that goes undetected and builds up, and we have to go through the process that we've outlined in detail in the notice of intent. And so therefore, would it be another option to perhaps make this condition that we're talking about, that if the beaver dam does get to this point again, and it does have to be removed, that whoever is in charge of the property has to make sure that the area is restored and grows back over time, and because the beaver dam could be somewhere else next time, and that way it isn't really tied to the certificate of compliance if it's an ongoing condition.
Well, so it is tied in that it is an ongoing condition, but yes, Scott, that is absolutely how the revised version that I had drafted, incorporating those conditions, that's what the spirit was in which it was drafted, just like your original document was. Additionally, I understand what you're talking about with the beaver activity, and this particular condition that we're talking about, the commission's talking about creating here during the meeting. That's because it wasn't included in the draft. I think that they're aware that it's within the same spirit, but I appreciate you highlighting that. But maybe then the resolve to that is to say at the end of that condition, this condition shall be one in perpetuity, or this shall be a perpetuitous condition, something to that nature. So it goes directly in the verbiage that way.
Does that make sense to you, Jeff? And
Well, as long as we have a path to closure within a reasonable period of time. So,
yeah, I think that's about as good as it can be
right.
for something like that. But it also gives us more motivation, and anybody who's maintaining that property, to keep an eye on the beaver dams, because it'll be a long.
A good example is they could be off the other side of the river and the stream, and that's something that we're not accessing. You know what I mean?
Right. Yeah,
So-
yeah. Yeah, that's true.
Okay.
So all that said, I have the wording, I think, that deals with the alterations, the reseeding, the path. Did we have other questions about, what was it, 50 feet off of the resource area? Any of the renaturalization that needed to? And I'm just, how we would need to write that.
I would say at least 50 feet off of the bank.
Yep.
Shall be naturalized
Yep.
or allowed to naturalize.
Okay.
And the reason why I would incorporate the at least portion is so that the new property owner has the ability to increase that.
Yep.
they so choose, or if the commission wishes to create that condition in the future.
Yep.
And then again, the last bit noting there shall be a condition in perpetuity on both of those.
Okay. All right. Any other questions, comments? From commission members? Any members of the public, Rebecca, here to comment on this evening?
Again, any members of the public, you are able to use the raised hand function or the chat function. And I am seeing no one.
Okay. In that case, I'd like to make a motion that we close the public hearing for a notice of intent for 580 Main Street, map 4.C, parcel 24. Do I hear a second for that?
Second.
All right, all those in favor, Emily,
Aye.
Jillian,
Aye.
Bill,
Aye.
and Rebecca, I am an I myself. All right. I'd like to make a motion that we issue an order of conditions for 580 Main Street, map 4.C, parcel 24, as drafted and submitted at this evening's meeting with the following additional conditions. That alteration within the jurisdictional areas associated with the beaver dam removal of up to 750 square feet shall be restored with native seed mixes appropriate for site conditions, and to ensure the access path naturalizes following this proposed work, and that these conditions be met in perpetuity. Also, that at least 50 feet of that at least 50 feet of area off of the banks of the resource area shall be allowed to naturalize. And this condition shall also be set in perpetuity. And third, that the final as-built plans at the end of this order of condition shall include a total amount of area disturbed. Do I hear a second? Go ahead, Rebecca. Was there something I missed?
And I would say area disturbed and area restored, and just so that they can document exactly what was done to restore that area.
That's excellent. All right, so that condition that the final as-built plan contains both area disturbed and area restored, and a full accounting of what actually took place within those areas or was used. All right. Do I hear a second?
Brian, I have one comment. Can we make sure that on the second part of the comment that the resource area is limited to the stream and the river, so it's not related? I mean, the resource area is a pretty wide open discussion point on that whole site. So
So
we
he
should
said the
limit it.
bank.
I was gonna say, I think
He said the
bank
bank,
should keep it to,
because we haven't defined, as you
Yeah.
heard from the prior individual, the resource areas on site where the bank
Right.
is very well defined. It's a physical feature. So that's
Okay.
why Brian referenced that on site. So it's 50 feet from the bank.
do I hear a second for the order of conditions plus those additional conditions?
I second Brian.
Okay. All those in favor, starting with Emily,
Aye.
Jillian,
Aye.
Bill,
Aye.
and Rebecca, I am an I as well.
Wonderful, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Appreciate
Have
it.
a good night.
Have a good night.
We did? Oh, perfect. All right, so the Bolton Conservation Commission will now continue the public hearing for Century Mill Road map 3.D parcel 75. And as people can see, hopefully on their screens, the applicant's representative requested a continuation via email to allow the plans to be updated with information from the arborist site visit the other week. So that said, unless I hear a reason not to, I'd like to make a motion that we continue the public hearing for Century Mill Road, map 3.D, parcel 75, until our next meeting, Tuesday, November 16th at 7:30 PM.
Yep.
Okay, do I hear a second for that?
Second.
All right, so all those in favor, starting with Emily,
Aye.
Jillian,
Aye.
Bill,
Aye.
and Rebecca, I am an aye as well.
Wonderful, thank you. Is that it? Am I missing something?
I think so.
You think so? I'm missing something? Or you think so? We're good?
No, I thought we had just a review of the budget.
Oh,
that in
yes, yes. Yes, we do have that. Did everyone get a chance to review the information that I had sent out related to the budget? Okay, were there any questions on that? There were screenshots of our budget documents. So were there any questions related to that? This year, we were requested to level fund again. Level funding, though, keep in mind, although we were very tight last year as far as what our expenditures were and previous invoices that we had received, and that's what it was based off of. Again, that's what this year is based off of, with the understanding that if the commission felt we didn't expend, or if they wanted to alter what we're expending our funds on within the various line items that we have of our budget, we have the ability to do that, and that is still counting as a level fund budget. Thoughts, questions? Brian has some, I know.
Ooh. No, I just want to share. I did talk to Rebecca earlier when we were kind of reviewing for this meeting. And basically I agreed with her. I thought we did really well relatively with the budget last year. As far as where I think we're going to come out, we're pretty close to what we thought we would do. I have been pushing for the past few years to increase funding to the conservation fund. At one, the town, everybody in town gave regularly to it. At one point in time, money was tight. They stopped it altogether. Nothing really, they never started going at it again, but we have happily spent the money that other generations saved up over the years on a number of projects, including Taggart most recently. So I think it's time that we start putting money back into it. So we have been doing that in recent years, little dribs and drabs. And I mentioned to Rebecca, I think I want to double it this year. Last year it was 500, and I think it's time we put $1,000 in it this year. Again, for a number of years it was $0, and then for a number of years it was $100. Town used to put $5,000 a year in. So I'm proposing that we double that up. And as Rebecca expertly said, we can find other places in the budget to kind of cut and shift things around. But what worries me, and I get the town's long-term plans, and again, we're all taxpayers here. Most, sorry, Rebecca, but we'll pay tax. Yeah, I was going to say you're happy about that one. So nobody wants to see our taxes go up. I am happy to play along with level funding. But here's the thing. Inflation's going up. It is up. It's on the rise. We are going to be paying more for goods and services. Whatever Henderson Stryker charged us last year, I'm sure they will charge us significantly more, not significantly. Office supplies, that's going up. The prices for all these things are going up. And also last year in 2019, we had more people than ever using our conservation land. A lot more people discovered our conservation land. A lot more people are interested in using our conservation land. So I just see usage of our properties and need for our services increasing. I see the cost of everything increasing. And I'm nervous about trying to stay level funded. I think if we only bump the budget by $500 over last year, I think that is pretty darn good. And Rebecca, you can easily blame it on the commissioner. You can blame it on me, because I'm sure Don would like to see everything level funded too. I get why everybody's asking for it, but I think it's our purview if we want to come in with a budget that's not level funded and say no. the advisory can tell us no, the town can vote us down. I just think we might, we're trying to cut at a time where all of a sudden our properties are hot, and everybody's going. And again, I feel bad that we have avoided replenishing the conservation fund that we happily spent to buy all sorts of good properties that we enjoy. So those are my initial thoughts. I'd love to hear people's thoughts tonight. And again, it's not something we need to vote on. It's a discussion to put together this final budget. So we'll be able to talk about it more. And then of course, anybody who wants to come to advisory, you're more than welcome to kind of go through it with them. Rebecca, look at her smiling. She loves it.
great.
It's a
I
great
love it.
time. So it's kind of a process. It's nothing we need to vote on right now. It's nothing, you need to be 100% set on, but just any thoughts, comments, ideas.
I agree wholeheartedly with you, Brian. I think that our conservation fund funding is smaller than it should be. I know that I definitely think that that should be increased, and it should definitely be a request of the town. $1,000 to me a year still seems minimal, but it's a start. And I think that if we can increase it this year and, go forward in the next few years increasing, I think that it should be looked at as a priority in this town. And $500 a year towards the conservation fund is kind of a joke to me. When we think about the tax rate in this town, how much goes into all these other amenities and services in this town. I would like to push as a commission to, see that increase over the next several years. And that sends also a good message to the community saying that this is a priority as we're looking forward to, preserve more natural spaces as we are developing more open spaces. It's just showing that this is kind of where we need to shift our priorities. And as you said, with quarantine over the past year and a half, we saw a huge uptick in the use of our open spaces and conservation properties. So I would really like to see that fund, get prioritized again. How long ago were they putting 5,000 a year in?
I will have to look this one up. Yeah.
I can look that up.
I'd be interested to know, and how was that for a long duration, but I definitely think $1,000 is a reasonable request now, and if we can kind of keep pushing as the years go on, I think we should. But everything else, in my opinion, looked good. I think it would be good to get that conservation fund, replenished.
I've got a question, Brian. Do we spend all of the line items every year?
Pretty
Close.
darn,
Yeah.
pretty darn close to it. This past year, we encumbered 2 line items. One was purchase of services for the Bower Springs Dam assessment, because the timing, we had to wait until, I think, July to do it. So we received the invoice in June, so we had to encumber it because they couldn't get out like they thought they originally could. And same thing with Jim Henderson, the site conditions were too wet. So although we had received the invoice, they weren't able to carry out the full project until just into this fiscal year.
Do we get to spend that money that we don't spend this year then? Can we put that in the conservation fund?
So
Can we reallocate it, I guess?
That's a good question. So I do
Good
want to
question.
clarify that the image that I sent you that shows where we are, the majority of those funds will be expended before the end of the fiscal year. So the fiscal year ends, as I'm sure you're aware, June 30th. So a lot of the work that we do is seasonal. We can't do it when the ground's frozen, or we're waiting for invoices to come in. They come in spring when things are installed, or just simply we're waiting for those invoices because we've already contracted out the work. That being said, again, I just want to note that because those items are what's there. Things, or even the training line item, there's a spring conference for MACC that I encourage all of you to go to. We budget for training funds so that you can be reimbursed, or you can just have me schedule it for you. and then I can just pay directly to that organization. Those sort of things, whatever is left though at the end of the fiscal year goes back to the general fund. What we are allowed to do, so for this fiscal year, we would not be able to do that. What you're referring to is if we have $100, $200 left, we can't then say we're going to allocate that to the conservation fund. What we can ask for this fiscal year, and I don't know how well or if it's even feasible, is when we present our budget request to advisory, we can ask that question at that time. If by any chance we save funding or we get some grants, can we use whatever's left and return it to the conservation fund and see what they say? I don't know what they will say, but that's the opportunity we have to ask that question, have it be allocated if they say yes and approve that method. If we wait until the end of the fiscal year, it's beyond our approved budget, to my understanding.
Okay.
Does that make, yeah. And that's something also I know both Emily and Brian had mentioned, sort of resource availability and funding other services within the town. So I do want to mention and thank our wonderful volunteers who assist me greatly, along with, I know the Bolton Conservation Trust is assisted by the Trails Committee as well. But we have a lot of work, which we typically do try to keep track of, and then provide that information to advisory, because the state estimates volunteer work hours are a certain amount. But the thing is, a lot of our volunteers actually have a lot of experience and are specialized in various fields. So that actually increases the amount that the state estimates their work value. And so when we're looking at our budget, we're not directly calculating in and including, we saved however many, whether it be $1,000, $800 on just labor this year, because we have awesome volunteers who come out and help us. They want to work on the trails. They want to help out the community. And I think that's really important to highlight. In addition to that, I always am looking for grants to try and reduce the overall cost of not only our services that we provide, but also once we're allocated the budget, how can the town get that reimbursement back if we have the ability to do so through various grants if they match up with our project. So those are things we're going to be highlighting as well during the advisory meeting once we iron out the budget with you all. So I think as far as what I'm hearing this evening, and again, I wouldn't expect a vote this evening, but maybe at the next meeting on the 16th, so that when the budget hearings start, I can confidently say this is something the commission has approved. It sounds like we want to increase the conservation fund request to $1,000 for this year from $500 as drafted. And then ask the question about, can we reallocate the funds at the end of fiscal year 23, which is what we're requesting the budget for, if there's unexpended funds, and see what they say. Is that reasonable? Okay, so I will incorporate that into the draft and then send that back out. Does anybody else have any questions or comments or things we spend money on or don't spend money on, or how it's spent?
Any members of the public here tonight to comment on this?
I see no one.
I think we have worked our way through the full agenda. Does anybody have any new business they wish to discuss? Any origami projects they want to show off?
I do want to know.
Go ahead.
The beard winter.
What?
I want to know if you're going to bring the beard back this winter.
The plague beard?
Yeah.
Yeah, I might have to. We'll see. We'll see. Yeah. And my wife hates you now. So yeah, this important things resolved. I'd like to make a motion that we hereby adjourn the Tuesday, November 2nd, 2021 meeting of the Bolton Conservation Commission. Do I hear a second for adjourning?
A second.
All right, all those in favor, starting with Emily,
Aye.
Jillian,
Aye.
Bill,
Aye.
and Rebecca. I am an I myself.
Wonderful.
all.
Thank you.
Yeah, everybody have a good week. We'll see you.
Recording stopped.
Good night.
Take care.